Ella Amafa's My Husband's Mother Destroyed My Marriage, a billionaire, marriage in crisis, second chance romance, reads like a glossy, emotionally charged television drama condensed into a single, propulsive novel. For American readers who devour contemporary romance with high stakes, wealth, family power plays, and the promise of reinvention, Amafa delivers a story that blends melodrama with intimate psychological realism. The book is built on a premise that feels both sensational and painfully familiar: a marriage strained by external interference, a mother-in-law whose influence corrodes trust, and a couple forced to choose between pride and repair. But beneath the surface fireworks, Amafa is interested in quieter things: how resentment accumulates, how love can be both fragile and stubborn, and how people rebuild themselves when the scaffolding of a life collapses. The novel opens in the aftermath of a public rupture. The protagonist, an intelligent, accomplished woman who has built a life beside a man of extraordinary means, finds herself isolated not only by scandal, but by the slow erosion of intimacy. Her husband is a billionaire, a man whose wealth buys comfort and distance in equal measure. He is not a cartoon villain. He is complicated, torn between loyalty to his mother and the obligations of marriage. Amafa sketches him with enough nuance that readers can see both his privilege and his vulnerability. The mother-in-law, the titular antagonist, is introduced as a force of old money and old expectations, controlling, persuasive, and convinced that she knows what is best for her son. She is not evil for the sake of it. She is a product of a social world that prizes lineage, reputation, and the maintenance of appearances. Amafa's strength is in the small domestic scenes that make the conflict feel real. She lingers on the micro-assaults that accumulate into catastrophe: a cutting aside at a family dinner, a withheld phone call, a public correction writing leads rather than instructs. These moments are the mortar of the novel. They show how power operates not only through grand gestures, but through the slow, corrosive work of undermining another person's confidence. The protagonist's sense of being gaslit, made to feel unreasonable for asserting needs, will ring true for many readers. Amafa writes these scenes with a keen ear for dialogue and a steady hand for pacing, so that the reader feels the protagonist's isolation without ever losing sympathy for the other characters. A central theme of the book is the collision of wealth and intimacy. Money does not simply solve problems here, it complicates them. The billionaire husband's resources create options: lawyers, private jets, the ability to retreat, but they also create distance. When conflict arises, it is easier for him to outsource pain than to sit with it. Amafa explores how wealth can become a buffer against accountability, and how families with money often have elaborate rituals for preserving reputation that can suffocate honest conversation. For American readers who live in a culture that both idolizes wealth and suspects its moral cost, this theme will feel timely. The novel asks whether love can survive when one partner's family treats marriage as a transaction, and whether a couple can reclaim intimacy when the social script insists on performance. Another major strand of the novel is the mother-in-law as cultural archetype. Amafa does not reduce the mother to a one-note villain. She gives her motives: fear of losing influence, a desire to protect a legacy, and perhaps a wounded past that taught her control is survival. This complexity matters because it prevents the story from becoming a simple morality play. Instead, the conflict becomes a study in competing loyalties: the son's filial duty, the wife's need for respect, and the muffish fear of obsolescence. Amafa uses these tensions to explore how families reproduce patterns across generations, and how difficult it is to break those patterns without radical honesty. The Amafa's emotional core is the protagonist's interior life. Amafa writes with empathy about shame, the private shame of feeling inadequate in a household that measures worth by pedigree and public image. She also writes about anger, not as a spectacle but a fuel for change. The protagonist's journey is not merely to win back her husband, but to reclaim her sense of self. That reclamation involves small acts of courage: setting boundaries, seeking counsel, and refusing to be silenced. Amafa treats these scenes as hard work rather than romantic gestures, which gives the book a moral seriousness that elevates it above mere soap opera. Plot-wise, the book moves through recognizable beats of the second-chance romance subgenre: separation, reflection, growth, and a tentative reunion. But Amafa complicates the formula by insisting that reconciliation requires structural change, not just emotional reconciliation. The husband must confront his mother's behavior and his own complicity. The mother must face the consequences of her manipulations, and the protagonist must decide whether forgiveness is possible without accountability. These demands make the eventual reunion feel earned rather than contrived. When the couple begin to rebuild, Amafa shows the slow, often awkward work of trust building, transparent communication, shared rituals, and the willingness to tolerate discomfort rather than retreat into avoidance.